Check out carmarshal.com. The link is in the description. They help support us.
A Herald Tribune investigative report. It's a lifelong battle. 1 war. 2 races. Day 3 of 4. HeraldTribune.com/drugs. It took Brett Ramsden more than a decade to get clean. By Josh Salman. Josh.Salman@HeraldTribune.com. Brett Ramsden filled the syringe with a mix of crack cocaine and lemon juice, then stuck the needle into his arm. He already was slow and dazed from injecting heroin. The 31-year-old awoke hours later at 3 a.m., his face planted on the patio table of an empty Palmetto seafood shack, unsure of how he got there. His friend was screaming that cops were on the way. Brett jumped on a stolen bicycle and set off for his parents' house, where he still lived. It took him 5 hours to make it less than a mile. He was first awakened by a homeowner, who found him unconscious in a flower bed. A block down the road, he passed out again on a sidewalk, the bike lying in the street. This time, an officer with the Palmetto Police Department was tapping him to move. At home, Brett crashed into walls and tripped over his feet. He split his lip on a door jamb. His family hysterical, he remembers yelling at them to leave him alone. Milk from. See Brett, A10. Brett Ramsden relaxes at home in Manatee County. After a number of felony arrests for retail theft to support his opioid addiction, Ramsden underwent addiction recovery at St. Matthew's House in Naples and is now counseling addicts at Riverside Recovery of Tampa. Mike Lang / Herald Tribune staff photo. Brett. Continued from A1. His breakfast cereal spilling onto the table and floor. Brett had been arrested earlier that year for a string of thefts to support his addiction. In a week, he was scheduled to check into a drug treatment center in Naples for his crimes. It was the opportunity his family awaited. But they feared he would not live to make it. Toward the end, it was getting really hard, said Brett's mother, Sharon. We didn't know what to do. Opioids, like heroin and the potent painkiller OxyContin, have been responsible for locking up 60,000 Floridians and killing 30,000 more since 2004. Brett lives in the epicenter of the crisis. Manatee County is home to the state's highest number of deaths per capita from heroin, morphine, and fentanyl, according to a review of medical examiner records. For a decade, Brett was hooked on opioids. He stole from family, neighbors, and local businesses for drug money. He crashed 3 new trucks driving under the influence. But he never spent more than a week behind bars. His family connections and his own promising potential helped Brett dodge DUIs, marijuana arrests and a criminal mischief conviction. At one point, Brett racked up 8 felony thefts in less than 6 months. Instead of jail, the judge sent him to drug rehabilitation, where he took control of his disease. Clean for 3 years, Brett, now 35, works as a recovery specialist helping other addicts in Tampa. He lives in the University Park apartment complex with 2 rescue pugs, his wife, and their infant daughter. Experts point to Brett as an example of the turnarounds possible through treatment. Florida courts are now sending more offenders to rehab in lieu of prison, with the number of defendants ushered into a residential program up 65% during the past 13 years. Experts say these offenders stand a better chance at recovery and leading productive lives. But in a state where lawmakers prefer to punish, tens of thousands of nonviolent addicts still languish behind bars as competition for treatment beds grows fierce. Almost every case is drug-related one way or another, said Lynn Kohler, an associate professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, who researched addiction at the Volusia County Jail. It's the core of the problem. When we punish them and send them to jail, it's futile. There's so few who get treatment, and that's their only real hope. Amazing I don't have 50 felonies. Clean-shaven, with a slender build and a native Floridian's drawl, Brett has a relaxed air about him more akin to a southern businessman than an addict. He has been reminded his entire life of his potential. Following in the steps of his older brother, Brett was a star baseball pitcher, earned good grades when he tried and proved popular no matter the crowd. He comes from a respected family close with the county's former clerk of court in a town where connections matter. "It really is amazing I don't have 50 felonies, Brett said from his living room couch, a Florida Gators throw pillow under his arm, one of the pugs on his lap and a painting of a fish chasing a line of bait hanging above him. Brett loved to party. He just didn't know when to stop. His mother had seen it before. One of Brett's uncles started smoking crack at age 54 and was dead within a year from an overdose. For Brett, it started as binge drinking on weekends at Emerson Point Preserve or Fort Hammer. He says dozens of acquaintances from high school would party until well past midnight at the various public hangouts. If a friend offered, Brett would puff a joint or experiment with the occasional pain pill, nothing the teens considered dangerous. When he turned 16, his father gave him a new truck, a Chevy S10 extended cab. Brett added an upgraded stereo to DJ outdoor parties. "You just kind of get thrust into that," Brett said. "You're popular and now you have a reputation. I was overly competitive, and if I was going to do something, I wanted to do it better than anybody else. So I would party harder than anybody else." By his senior year in 2000, Brett's grades slipped. His friends went off to college. He enrolled in a few local classes but dropped out after a month. School took a backseat to partying. When he was 19, his dad helped Brett get a part-time job in Sarasota County's Information Technology Department. Because he didn't earn it, that gig didn't last long. "I never had to ask for anything," Brett said. "I never took responsibility for my actions." Brett's disease took hold, and, like so many in Manatee County, he found his way to opioids, addictive pain medications. By the late 1990s, a powerful new opioid called OxyContin had infiltrated Florida. Makers pushed the drug as a new miracle treatment for pain. Doctors were lax when vetting patients, and hundreds of fly-by-night clinics dubbed pill mills opened, specializing in oxy handouts to itchy, walk-in patients with cash. Oxys also flowed through the black market, where they were cheap and easy to find for addicts like Brett. His friends knew a cancer patient who wanted extra money to spend his dying days traveling. The man had a prescription for 600 green OxyContin pills a month, enough for 20 pills per day. He would sell Brett's friend half. Each 80 mg pill lasts for up to 12 hours. For 9 years, Brett would snort 1 or 2 oxys a day at $40 apiece, but he never injected them. If he couldn't find oxys, he would settle for the little blue sister, Roxicet. "I had found what I was looking for," Brett said. "And that was it. Should have gone to jail." Brett and his family wrote it off as adolescence. So did law enforcement. When Brett was pulled over drunk behind the wheel in 2000, his final baseball season at Palmetto High, the officer gave him a ticket, court records show. "I was speeding home to beat curfew," Brett said. "I should have gone to jail, but he allowed me to call my parents, and they picked me up. I think the cop knew I played baseball." Another time, police stopped him at Emerson Point after a night of underage drinking. Brett says he was carrying 2 small bags of marijuana but was never arrested. The Manatee County Sheriff's deputies called his father instead. "I told him Brett pitched for Palmetto and was pretty good," said Brett's father, Pete. "The officer told me I'm not going to arrest him. I wish they had." Brett recalls driving drunk in the rain at 17, when he hit the median and bent his truck's frame. "It's a small town, and the cops didn't see. He towed the truck to his parents' house, parked it in the garage and left to get wasted." Another time, he caught the truck on fire driving donuts in a field. When Brett designed a custom Dodge Dakota 2 years later, he pulled the $25,000 pickup out of the dealership at 6 p.m., and wrecked it drunk by 1 a.m. He drove it 37 miles, tossing empty beer cans in the bed. Authorities issued Brett another ticket. What does his dad do? Brett's father said. His dad goes out and gets him a new truck. Brett didn't stop driving drunk. He pushed the brakes too hard on the V8 engine and began sliding sideways in the rain down 10th Street in Palmetto. When the pickup crashed into the grass, Brett's silver truck shot into the air, hit a branch and came down on all fours. The tree crushed the passenger side. Brett walked away with just a scratch on his arm and a ticket. That was a turning point, Brett said. It was a near-death experience for me. I just threw up my hands, and said let's do this. From there, Brett vowed to live to the fullest. That meant more partying. At that point in my life, I wasn't ready to start a career or any of that, he said. I knew so many people who went to work because they had to, and they were miserable. I wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And I wanted to have some fun. A lot of tension. Heroin deaths in the US have tripled since 2010, bringing national attention to an opioid crisis that found its way to Florida much earlier. Brett began snorting crushed. See Brett, A11. Brett Ramsden now lives in University Park with his wife, their child, and 2 rescue pugs. He has been clean for 3 years. Herald Tribune staff photo / Mike Lang. Brett Ramsden was a star baseball pitcher for Palmetto High School. Photo provided by Brett Ramsden. By late 2013, Brett Ramsden had been arrested multiple times, racking up a string of felony theft charges. Brett continued from A10. OxyContin pills in 2001. He started stealing not long after. It was around 2 a.m. on a muggy October morning in 2002. High on the anti-anxiety pill Xanax, Brett walked into a 7-Eleven convenience store and began stuffing cans of whipped cream down his pants. Maybe 8. He craved a quick high from huffing the compressed nitrous oxide. As the clerk questioned Brett about shoplifting, a Palmetto police officer walked into the store. During the ride to jail, Brett remembers saying he would rather die than spend the night in lockup. The officer checked him into mental health treatment under the Baker Act instead. That was fortunate because I got right out. No jail. No punishment, he said. I even got the perk of eating a real breakfast at the hospital, some eggs and bacon. Brett's descent into addiction took a toll on his health and his family. It also led to a deeper life of crime. Brett and his girlfriend were both addicted, living together in his parents' guest house. The couple developed a system of writing worthless checks to Walmart to get cash back. When the scheme led to a $900 overdraft for Brett's bank account, he called his father. Dad was always very good at coming to the rescue, Brett said. He started pawning all his belongings, TVs, jewelry, camera, a computer printer. His parents changed the house locks and installed an alarm system to keep their son out. When his mother gave him a used car she'd bought with cash, Brett drove it to a rundown dealership on US 301 in Samoset and took out a title loan, forging his mother's signature to borrow $2,200 at 30% interest. The money disappeared in secluded parking lots and gas stations, where he would meet the dealers of the day. Brett's mother wanted to kick him out of the house. His father wouldn't allow it. Now divorced, they often fought over what to do with Brett. There's no way my husband would kick him out, his mother, Sharon, said. When it comes down to it, I don't know if I really could have either. That's your son. It's hard. And Brett told me later that if we had done that, he probably would have died. Brett's father said he understands that he was too soft at times. He wanted to help his son. He just didn't know how. From my perspective, as a parent, I was probably in denial, Pete said. I don't know if I did it wrong or right. But I enabled him. There was a lot of tension in the house. Just cried and cried. Brett awoke hazy. He was still disoriented from a blackout night of Xanax. My first thought was, I want some oxy, Brett said. but he had no job, no money, and no ride. That wouldn't stop Brett from getting high. His friend's mother was recovering from arm surgery. Brett suspected she might have pills. He walked 4 blocks and hopped the fence to her house. All of the windows were locked except for one in the carport. Brett never found prescriptions. He took some jewelry, then set off on the 3-mile trek to a pawn shop in Ellington. The next day, Brett returned for a ring and a necklace. Brett's parents were out of town. His friends were over, getting high and eating Hungry Howie's pizza. That was when 3 Palmetto police cruisers pulled up to the house. Charged with felony burglary, Brett spent the next 4 days in jail. His parents and older brother came to visit. They begged him to quit drugs. "We all just cried and cried," his mother said. Brett scored 22 points on his sentencing guidelines, the formula used in Florida's court system to determine criminal punishments. Facing a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison, he agreed to a plea deal that instead called for probation, a common form of jail diversion, court records show. The judge and prosecutor also agreed to withhold adjudication, so Brett would not be considered a convicted felon. Through family, he was referred to a sober home in Naples. Brett lived in the halfway house with other recovering addicts. They would go work for the property owner's landscaping business during the day and attend sobriety meetings at night. They'd also go to church twice a week. "We went to meetings, went to Bible study and went to work," Brett said. That was pretty much it, just a bunch of guys in a house, trying to get clean. He spent almost 8 months there sober for most. More is always better. Brett was living at the sober home in Naples when he got the call. A friend was in a coma from an overdose. Brett returned to Manatee County in time to say goodbye to his buddy, kept alive only by cords and plugs. Brett was high on oxys at the funeral. "It's told to you on the streets that it is just a pain pill, a very powerful pain pill," Brett said. "And I had done pain pills before, and I liked them. So, an addict's mentality is that more is always better." Opioids attach to receptors in the brain, suppressing the system's ability to communicate and adjust. The chemical overwhelms the reward system with dopamine, creating euphoria and cravings for more. "You have a drug that tricks your brain into thinking it's the best day ever," Brett said. "You're living in bliss. Then, you wake up. And you're sick." "I needed it more than I needed food or water." When he wasn't high, Brett struggled to get out of bed. He compared detoxing to a bad flu. The effects were too much for him to keep a job. "Our bodies are homeostatic entities, so you introduce a neurotransmitter and your brain will compensate by reducing that neurotransmitter," said Jonathan Calkins, a drug policy expert at Carnegie Mellon University. "At first, opioids work because they're fantastic in the short run for treating pain," Calkins said. "But your brain adjusts and recalibrates, so when you take it away, you feel even worse than you felt in the first place." "Didn't learn my lesson." Brett's family found a clinic from the Venice Yellow Pages that prescribed naltrexone, designed to help addicts quit. When taken together with opioids, the medication makes withdrawal feel even worse. His father watched Brett eat the naltrexone every day. Brett's dad also helped him find a new job with Manatee County Clerk of the Court R.B. Chips Shore. The popular clerk, who died in 2015, was a close family friend and the officiant who married Brett's parents. Brett focused his time on fishing tournaments. It was July 2008, and he had been clean for 9 months. That's when he and a buddy got the idea on a boat to try opioids one last time. He called an old number on his phone. It still worked. "We were all looking at each other like, what did we just do?" Brett said. "I didn't learn my lesson." It's odd, looking back. Substance abuse specialists say it's common for addicts to relapse as part of the recovery process. For some, it can take a dozen tries or years spent navigating different programs for sobriety to stick. Some will relapse after decades of not using. It's relearning how to live life without a substance, said Melissa Larkin Skinner, Chief Executive of Centerstone Treatment Center in Bradenton. It's a lifelong battle. Some compared an addict, like Brett, experimenting with drugs to someone with diabetes trying to eat the same sugary foods as a person without the disease. Addiction is a literal hijacking of the brain, said Bob Piper, a vice president at First Step in Sarasota. It's out of control. A pair for a pill. Florida Governor Rick Scott and Attorney General Pam Bondi clamped down on pill mills by 2012, creating a statewide database to monitor prescriptions and prevent patients from selling their doses on the street. Life for Brett and other addicts changed. Oxys disappeared almost overnight. But the cravings didn't. The shift in supply and demand made prices skyrocket. Roxicet pills that sold for $10 3 years earlier now commanded $35. During the height of the pill crisis, Brett's addiction was manageable. He lasted nearly a decade without an arrest or overdose. But when the supply vanished, Brett needed a lot more cash to support his addiction. He turned to shoplifting. Brett says he would steal shoes from the outlet mall in Ellenton, fishing gear from Walmart, or swipe school clothes for the dealer's children as trades for drugs. They coined it a pair for a pill. My conscience couldn't handle the amount of things we were stealing, Brett said. I broke down into tears on my back porch. It was something in my soul. Looking back, it was almost like a really bad warning. During the next 6 months, Brett was booked 8 times for felony theft. Police arrested him in May 2013 after he attempted to return stolen groceries from a Publix supermarket using an old receipt. Surveillance cameras captured him taking the items off the shelf, putting them into his cart and walking right to the return line. The next month, Brett swiped $525 worth of fishing poles and reels from Walmart, removing the packaging in the automotive section before fleeing through the garden center. In July, Sarasota County Sheriff's C. Brett, A12. Melissa Larkin Skinner, CEO of Centerstone of Florida, a mental health and addiction hospital in Bradenton, calls addiction a lifelong battle. Herald Tribune staff photo / Mike Lang. A room for residents undergoing addiction treatment at Riverside Recovery of Tampa. Herald Tribune staff photo / Mike Lang. Bunk beds for participants undergoing treatment for addiction at St. Matthew's House in Naples. Addicts live in close quarters during the strict first month of their treatment regimen. Herald Tribune staff photo / Mike Lang. Brett. Continued from A11. Deputies booked Brett after he walked into Sports Authority, took 3 pairs of sneakers into the dressing room, stuck the shoes in his shoulder bag and walked out, incident records show. Authorities discovered that Brett had pilfered $260 worth of fishing gear from Sports Authority the day before and pawned the merchandise in Bradenton. They also found items in Brett's Jeep that had been reported stolen from another department store. In August, Brett was back at the department store. This time, witnesses saw him stuff 3 pairs of shoes into his pants and walk out. Manatee County Sheriff's deputies arrested him for the $200 theft. Publix employees also went back to review past surveillance tapes and helped tack on several more theft charges, court records show. That was enough for Brett's girlfriend of 7 years to leave. Forget the felonies, Brett said. That was probably the most devastating thing to happen to me. His case resolution was scheduled for January 2014. For the first time, my future was in doubt, Brett said. But I never fathomed prison. My lawyer told me I was the ideal candidate for drug court. So I thought, let's do it another system that I can skirt. He didn't get in. Watching him deteriorate was just horrible. Brett's court date was a week away. His father scoured the internet for rehab centers, but Brett didn't have health coverage, and costs could reach $100,000 for a 40-day program. The family couldn't afford anything close. That's when Brett's brother heard about a faith-based rehab program in Naples that welcomed addicts without insurance for free. All they had to do was convince the prosecutor and judge. But Brett was spiraling downhill fast. His father remembers trying to call Brett one afternoon to check in. No answer. So he left work early to see if his son was at home. When he got there, Brett was unconscious on the floor, used needles lying around. That same week, Brett passed out at a Burger King. And again on the patio of the Clam House, the seafood restaurant in Palmetto. His father took Brett to Pensacola to stay with his sister for a few days. Brett made it back to Manatee County for his court date. But he was high at the hearing. His eye sockets darkened, Brett was flailing his arms around while trying to address the judge, his mother remembers. On the ride home, he curled like a fetus in the front seat of her Mustang. She considered taking him to the hospital. Watching him deteriorate was just horrible, she said of Brett. But there's nothing you can do to help him. He wasn't ready to help himself. The judge agreed to sentence Brett to residential treatment at St. Matthew's House for all 8 felonies along with 2 years of probation, to run concurrently. By this time, Brett's weight was down about 50 pounds to 140. Reactions to the crack cocaine caused his arms and legs to swell with fluid. Brett didn't care. He packed a couple bags, injected crack one last time, and his parents drove him 130 miles to Naples. I just didn't want to do this anymore. As Brett walked into First Baptist Church of Naples, a calming voice came over him. Welcome back, Brett, he remembers hearing at the Friday service. Where've you been? It was the same church where Brett had attended sermons a decade earlier while in Naples trying to get clean. Brett started sobbing. I was tired, he said. I just didn't want to do this anymore. He'd found God. This St. Matthew's House Ministry runs a drug rehab program based on therapeutic models with no doctors or prescription detox medicine. There's a zero-tolerance policy for relapse. The first month is called the motivational track. Brett had to wake up at 5 a.m. every day. Some nights, he slept on a jail mat on the kitchen floor. He remembers seeing cockroaches. But he couldn't see visitors, write letters, or make phone calls. At times, there were 15 other men in the 3-room recovery house in Old East Naples Fire Station. During his 6th month there, Brett got in trouble for skipping chores. He didn't fill the big water jugs put out for the homeless, who ate lunch at the ministry's soup kitchen. The next day, the group leader made Brett go around with a pitcher and refill each homeless person's cup. Brett enjoyed the camaraderie and accountability. He'd found a new home. In the process of getting sober, people will struggle, they'll want to leave and have cravings, said the Reverend Van R. Ellison, St. Matthew's president and CEO. We want to help you make it. Brett became close with Chad Couture, another resident at the program, who also struggled with opioid addiction. Couture said that during their stay at St. Matthew's, Brett was a natural leader. He wasn't afraid to tell us what he was thinking and let us have it, Couture said. That helped me because I was more shy and timid. That balanced us out. Brett graduated in March 2015, after more than a year in the program. He wore a tuxedo to the ceremony. Graduates from each class vote for the person who made the biggest impact in the lives of others. Brett and Couture were the first co-winners of the award. St. Matthew's invited Brett back as an alumni speaker for their graduation 3 months later in June 2015. They also put him on a campaign flyer for donor contributions. Going through what I went through, it changes your perspective on life, Brett said. Before, I would call myself narrow-minded and borderline racist. It really changed my point of view. Never thought he'd clean up. Brett's wife, Mallory, was in Italy celebrating her 30th birthday when she saw Brett's alumni graduation speech on Facebook. Also from Manatee County, she remembered Brett from his worst. The two were just friends but began getting closer online. Brett moved out of St. Matthew's in Naples to be with Mallory in Houston. They married in September 2016 and had their first child almost exactly a year later, a baby girl weighing 8 pounds and 5 ounces. They named her Tegan. "I never thought he'd clean up," Mallory said. A convicted felon, Brett struggled to find a job after recovery. Because of his record, he could not obtain the necessary clearance required to work for a rehab program that housed children or accepted certain government funding. His father said Brett couldn't even lease an apartment. Brett is now taking classes toward an associate's degree at St. Petersburg College, with plans to then seek his bachelor's degree and maybe more. He also landed a position as a behavioral health technician at Riverside Recovery in Tampa, with dreams of one day running his own rehab center. A former charter hospital, Riverside Recovery is a 60,000 square foot facility with 68 beds overlooking the banks of the Hillsborough River. It's a considerable change from the more modest and rugged living quarters at St. Matthew's House. The multimillion-dollar center has a boating dock for kayaking, and is installing a recreational swimming pool and sand volleyball courts. There's also a half-court basketball gym and exercise room. The rooms more closely mirror a Hyatt than a rehab facility. So does the lobby, with colorful art on the walls and a water habitat theme. A month of treatment at Riverside costs just under $20,000 on PAR, with the industry average for private recovery in Florida. "The first thing you have to do to get yourself out of a hole is stop digging," said Riverside Recovery founder and CEO Kirk Kirkpatrick, a Tampa financier who struggled with his own addiction to opioids. "Sometimes people hit a bottom they never thought they would. What we're trying to do is be on the cutting edge of recovery, using many of the advancements in medical technology." Brett awakes at 4:30 a.m. and jumps out of bed to get to work by 6:30 a.m. given the 60-minute commute to Tampa. He's already had one patient's mother shake his hand thanking Brett for his help in her son's recovery. "It's all hands on deck," Brett said. "These people are suffering from a disease. It's not a choice. It's a degenerative disease. Would you punish somebody with diabetes if they had to steal to get their medication? Maybe. But you'd think about it differently." Riverside Recovery of Tampa, where Brett Ramsden now works as an addiction counselor, is situated on the Hillsborough River. Herald Tribune staff photo / Mike Lang. This photo of Brett Ramsden with his sister was taken shortly before he entered treatment. Photo provided by Brett Ramsden. Copyright 2017 Herald Tribune, all rights reserved. Restricted use only December 17, 2017.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I wanted to explain what fair use is. You can use pieces of news articles if you're doing it for news reporting, you have commentary, and you're doing it for education purposes. So that's what fair use is, as you can see right here. Another reason why I wanted to make this video is to let you know I just joined with Patreon. A nice thing with Patreon, I make no money on YouTube. They took the money away years ago, and so this is another way to give, and it's a nice thing too because you can give monthly. You can give $1, $5, $10, whatever. I do 4 to 5 hours a day on trying to wake the sheeple up on how corrupt it is and different ways that you can fight the corruption. So Patreon is a way that you can do it, and then of course the old way is still there. Donate to Charlotte County COPWATCH with PayPal or credit card. So keep that in mind. 4 to 5 hours a day. I make no money, but the corruption happened to me and I'm sick of it, so I'm trying to wake people up. But my wife would love it if if we could get some help out there. There's 47,000 subscribers. Just think if each one of you subscribers just gave let's say actually yes, $1 a month. 47,000 subscribers gave $1 a month. That would be awesome. That's not going to happen. But anyways, that would be great if it did happen. But do the math in your head. Just think about it. Like I said, 4 to 5 hours a day. I get no money from YouTube. YouTube has gone nuts. You can't do anything anymore. They're taking the money away everywhere. So these are a couple different ways that you can still help out with all this time that I put in. And as you know, I'm in a special situation where, at least I can do it, 4 to 5 hours a day. We have a cleaning company during the day. That's what allows me to do this, and we're debt free. So this is my hobby. I don't go fishing and all that other crap. I try to save the world. So help me out to make the wife happy, man. In fact, if you guys did give $1 a day, and there was 47,000 of you, and you did it, and each of you gave $1, and that was every month, oh my God, yes, I could quit. I could start suing them. Another idea too that we have is, if I got some funds, we could actually contact everyone that has been ticketed and or arrested and put in jail and start sending them postcards to let them know we're here, and to see if everything went all right, and if it didn't, find out their story. So we could even do more investigations and more lawsuits. Lawsuits take money. So just think about that. 47,000 of you so far right now. $1 a day. $1 a month on Patreon, or $5 a month Patreon, 10, 20, whatever. Just do the math in your head. Help out. This is a lot of work every single day. Thanks.